Very inspiring words.
Okay, so we start. The Parsha is Parshat BESHALAH, and before we start, let's just share a perspective. There are 8.5 billion nefashos on this planet, and if you think for a moment, how many of those people ever really think about their life at all? In other words, think about the fact that they don't know where they come from, they don't know where they're going, they don't know why they're alive, they don't know what's expected of them, they don't have any real purpose in life other than maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And it's amazing that so many people are content with living their 60, 70, 120 years and not knowing why they were alive. They have no, and very little interest in finding out. In fact, if you tried to, and I can share with you that I've tried this with one or two people over the years. I've had a couple of secretaries that I've asked these questions, and I get this sort of blank response of boredom and, you know, when can we talk about the movies and when can we talk about something decent, you know? Because for them, this is just boring. They don't. And the reality is that most people will go to their graves dissatisfied and absolutely knowing no better than the day they were born what they lived for. Children help. If people have children, they will report to you that they live for their children, or their children make their lives worthwhile, or some people who make an inordinate amount of money might tell you that that's the purpose of their existence. That's pretty sad. But most people haven't got a clue, and it's an important part of Hasidus in general, Chabad Hasidus in particular, to knock you on the head and say, are you kidding? Are you really prepared to spend another day of your precious life without considering some of the fundamental things that we're talking about? Why are you alive at all? And what are you hoping to achieve? And is that achievement that you're hoping for a real achievement or a nonsensical achievement? I mean, if your achievement is going to be a Bentley, I mean, is it really worth living 60, 70, 120 years so that you end up with a rusting piece of tin that you finally got your Bentley? I mean, who needs this? And what the Rebbeim in Chabad tried to do, and they use much less boring language than we're talking at the moment. It's much less obvious. They don't come and hit you on the head with this stuff. But what Chabad Hasidus is coaxing a Jew to do is to investigate what his own life is about, why it works the way it does, and what are your and my responsibilities with our life, and by fulfilling those responsibilities, flowering and growing and having a life of value. And it's real value. It's real value as opposed to nonsense. So in Parshat BESHALAH, the Chabad Rebbeim, and I can't even nominate one in particular because each one in his own style spent a lot of time on three separate areas. And I'll try and summarize bits of each of these three areas, because a lot of the time, in the Rebbe's Farbrengens in Parshat BESHALAH, he talks about these three areas. But Parshat BESHALAH has miracles. It's replete with miracles, and there are two ways you can read about a miracle, assuming you believe it. If you read a miracle believing it, you can think of it as a one-off event, or you can think of it as an extraordinary issue which requires investigation on its own. Why would God, who creates who is perfection, who is creating the world every moment, why would he, and is creating it every moment, as we'll see through Shem Elokim, through nature, and has this whole natural genius ecosystem playing at every microsecond, why would he need to interfere with his own brilliant creation to make a miracle? Why? And if you accept that he does from time to time, how dumb is it not to want to know why and what you can learn out of that? And these are issues which are really about life and death and why we live at all. So in Parshat BESHALAH, the three things that are usually farbrengt about in one piece or one way or another is the whole account of the Mon, which is an extraordinary miracle, the manna, Kriyas Yamsuf, the crossing of the sea, which is an incredible miracle and has to be understood at a very much deeper level than the story and the account, and a date in our calendar, which is Yud Shvat, which was the date that the previous Rebbe died, and a year later, the date that our Rebbe accepted the Nesius. And those three things share various common ideas, and those common ideas are in relation to what we're talking about, finding out why we're alive. So I'm going to try and summarize each of the three of them and show you how the Rebbe ties them together. And I can't even say that it's the Rebbe's extraordinary brilliance on his own, because all of the Rebbes have dealt with these aspects one way or another, through one aspect or another. So let's start with the Mon. Let's start with the miracle of the Mon. Everybody probably knows most of these things. When we had Yetzias Mitzrayim, when we left Mitzrayim, the Jews said to Moshe blew a whistle, said everybody out into the desert, and 4/5 of the Jews said, "You're kidding. What are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? Where are we going to live?" And 1/5 said, "No, you're our Rebbe, and you say, go, we're going." And they did. Now, those people who went with Moshe Rabbeinu, 1/5 of Am Yisrael, they went into the Midbar, the desert, with some provisions, admittedly, but not understanding how they can make those provisions work. And suddenly there was no food except slaughtering their cattle. If they slaughtered their cattle, they'd be impoverished for other reasons. Well, I won't go through that now. But so they came to Moshe and said, "Okay, we followed you into the Midbar, but what do we eat?" So Moshe says, "Good question." He goes to God and he says, "You got to give them to eat." So God says, "Yes, get to it." And every day, 365 days a year except Shabbos and Yom Tov, they woke up in the morning, and outside their tents, depending on what sort of lives they live, we haven't got time to go through it, tzaddikim one way, Bainim another way, Rishoyim another way, had to go out and collect the mon. The mon was something that apparently looked like coriander. That's what it says in translation. I've never seen coriander. I don't know what coriander looks like. But apparently it's a white powdery thing. And it was sandwiched between 2 layers of dew. Yeah. And everybody was told that they had to go out and collect an oima, which is a weight. And if they, and so of course, Israel being what they are, you got some guys who said, oh, I'm not collecting 1 oima, I'm collecting 3. Yeah. And another was too lazy, and he says, I don't like the look of this stuff anyway, so I'm not really taking it. And they found miracle number 1 was the fact that the mon was there. Miracle number 2 was that oima was the amount counted by every skull, every head, every person. Every person got exactly 1 oima. If they collected more, it went bad. If they collected little, it grew, unless they did it out of laziness and wanting God to do their work for them. But if they were doing what they were told, and they went out and got their oima, how much is an oima, by the way? It's about, Rashi says it's 45 or 43, I can't remember, 43 and 1/5 egg. Mm-hmm. That's an oima. So, and that was, and it was miraculous food. It tasted of whatever you wanted it to taste. You wanted fillet steak, you got fillet steak. You wanted, like Kremnizer, dreaming of the old days, you wanted whiskey, it would have been whiskey. So whatever you wanted, that's how it tasted. And so that was a miracle. The miracle was that it didn't last longer than, now what about Shabbos? So on Friday they collected a double portion. That's, by the way, why we have 2 challahs on the table. And that's why we have 2 pieces of matzah when at Pesach, to remember the double portion. And this went on for 40 years while they were in the Midbar. As a result of the Meraglim, they had to stay in the Midbar 40 years, as everyone knows. So the manna fell every day for 40 years except Shabbos and Yom. And there are some serious questions about the mon, because first of all, Yisrael got sick of it. They didn't like it. They didn't like it. Why? Because at the end of the day, the Gemara says a blind man can't enjoy his food. Why? You need to see it. If you want fillet steak, you don't want white powder. Even if the white powder tastes like fillet steak, it doesn't have the same, it doesn't give you the same satisfaction, satiating. You're not as satiated. So they got sick of it, and they didn't like it, and they complained to Moshe. That's another story. We haven't got time for that in this year. So, but what about the quantity? I mean, if you're going to think at all, miracle, not miracle, what about the quantity? Are you telling me that that 6'2" giant and 3-year-old little girl needs the same amount of food to sustain them? How can you say that? And yet everybody got exactly 1 omer, not a bit more and not a bit less, and that sustained them perfectly. So perfectly that they had no waste. There was no one excreted. There was nobody excreted feces for 40 years in the desert. Because there was no waste. It was God's food, therefore it was perfect. There was no waste. So it's so good that there's no waste, and yet people, we're a fussy lot. They weren't so happy with it. And
dessert.
Huh?
There was no dessert.
Well, so out of the 42 eggs, you couldn't leave 3 over in portion and dream of ice cream as well as the fillet steak. So, but the 43 and a quarter eggs, and a fifth eggs, satisfied everybody from the 3-year-old little girl to the 6'2" giant. How is that possible? So the short, quick answer is, well, it was a miracle. So if it's a miracle, the miracle's a miracle, and part of the miracle is that it satisfied everyone. The Rebbe says that's not right. You can't argue like that, because Hashem doesn't make a miracle unnecessarily. So every miracle is a miracle only to the extent that it has to be the miracle. So the Rebbe explains this. I'm making this bekitzer as much as possible. He explains this. What's food? Let's understand what food is for a human being. Food is the bridge between your soul and your guf, your soul and your body. If you interrupt that bridge, if you take that bridge away, you die. The body dies. The soul can't die, but the body dies. The soul, by the way, we're having a shir on Torah, so I'll keep it to Jews. A Jewish soul, which is termed the neshama, the general word for it is the neshama, is a part of Hashem, Helik Eloika Mimal, a part of Hashem himself, and therefore, make no mistake about it, don't ever get this wrong, it is not created. It's not part of creation. Soul is not part of creation. The soul is a Helik Eloika. Now, when the soul descends into a body and enlivens a body, the bridge between the soul and the body continuing their relationship is food. Food and water, of course. Food and liquid. But liquid is really the same. It's the same Indian. So if you interrupt that food, you interrupt the life of the guf. Everybody understands that. You don't need Hasidus for that. But what you do need Hasidus for is to understand that there are 2 levels to the soul's energy. The life force that a soul has 2 different aspects. They're called, I have to use the Hebrew word, they're called a highest klali, which means a general life force, and a highest prati, which means a particular life force. So, let me give you an example. Let's pretend that you have a person who, God forbid, is comatose in hospital. Let me ask you a question. Is that person alive? He's alive.
Yes, it's alive.
If you kill that person, are you guilty of murder? 100%.
Yeah.
You have no right to shorten that person's life, just as if he was an Olympic fit Australian Open winner. Exactly the same thing. They are both alive to exactly the same extent in terms of the fact that the guf is being energized spiritually by the neshama. However, that energy that is being given from the neshama to the guf to keep it alive is a general energy. The energy that is feeding the eye or the ear or the nose or the toenail or the heel, which is in Torah is generally accepted as the most grob, the most physical part of the body, as opposed to the brain, which is or the heart, which are much more sophisticated organs. So that they're all being energized in exactly the same way. However, if you once you begin to study your own life, your own movements, your own, you find that there are energies from the neshama which are highest prati, which are particular. For example, you have somebody who has a stroke, God forbid, and so some part of his body is impaired, then the body is going to be impaired. The soul isn't impaired. If you have a person who, for example, I'll give you a factual example. People used to go deaf in their 40s and 50s. People still go deaf, but they used to go deaf much earlier, until they discovered what? That their ears were filling up with wax, and they weren't cleaning out the wax, and as to the extent that they weren't cleaning out the wax, they couldn't hear. When they discovered this and they began to clean out the wax, the person began to hear again. So did anything happen to the koyak of hearing? Nothing happened. He didn't lose any of his life force to hear. The instrument was defective. You fix the instrument, the life force is there. So you have two levels of energizing life force. A general level which keeps a person alive, and can be comatose, or then you have a very sophisticated level where you get somebody who plays sport in a very clever way, or thinks or has got a genius brain, who can analyze and work things up. People have incredible memories. I mean, there are people with photographic memories. I know a person with a photographic memory. It's a genuine photographic memory. Excuse me. I'm sure the Rebbe had a photographic memory. It's impossible that he quoted what he quoted for hours and hours every Shabbos, and he looked it up that week and wrote it down somewhere secret. I mean, he didn't have anything in front of him. So, in fact, there was just to prove a point, there was a old man Gurevich, the father of the Gurevich in Shul in Melbourne. He used to come collecting to Sydney. He was a lovely old man, and he was he was in Paris with the Rebbe before the Rebbe came to America, and the Rebbe, everybody was very poor, of course, and they were all staying in various places, and the Rebbe was staying in a hotel, and he gave a shiur once a week or twice a week, I can't remember which, on Gemara, and a few learned Jews would come to the shiur, and the Rebbe, and they had no material, so they all of them were sharing a couple of Gemaras and all trying to see, and the Rebbe had a Gemara of his own, which people insisted that he should have the privilege of not having to share because he was the Rebbe, right? So the Rebbe had this Gemara, and the Rebbe would give the shiur, and he'd quote the Rashi, and then he'd quote the Tosfos, and then he'd quote. And this man, Gurevich, said that he would take a Sefer Torah and swear on his children that they found out that the Gemara that the Rebbe was using was a completely different volume. He did it to look nice, you know,
So he knew
but
it.
he knew it all off by heart. Now that's a life force which is particular.
Mm-hmm.
So the Rebbe explains, well, what's going on with the Mon? Why was it that the Mon was missing piece. The amount of food that is necessary to sustain a human being is the same. It's the same whether you're a 3-year-old girl or a 6'2" giant. It may be very much more uncomfortable, but in order to sustain life, there is a given minimum measure. And that minimum measure applies to whoever the person is, top athlete, little child. So the Rebbe asks the question, or really formulates this dialogue, that what's the proof of that? That when a newborn baby feeds from its mother, it all babies feed approximately the same amount. It's only as they grow older and more sophisticated and more that the highest proti, the particular aspects of that baby start to grow, because the original baby hasn't got powers of memory and powers of speech and powers of hearing and it's just one glob of newly born potential. But as that potential becomes actualized, the life force becomes more specific, to the point that, and you've got to understand the depth of this mashal, that the Rebbe is explaining that when Am Yisrael left Mitzrayim, when there was the Yetzias Mitzrayim, that was the birth of the nation. So the nation only required the mon. But once they got to Eretz Yisrael, when the mon stopped, the moment they got to Eretz Yisrael. Why did it stop? Because by then we were expected to be an adult nation rather than a baby nation. And then the mon's not good enough. The mon is not, it's only going to give a general life force to like a baby gets or a comatose person gets. It's not going to be sufficient to drive all his different specific energies and skills. Which means that you've got to have an understanding that you have specific energies and skills. And everybody's specific energies and skills are completely, entirely different. And each person's energies and skills are going to be tailored to meet his nisyonis, to meet his tests. And the Rebbe Rashab in a Maimah called Renat, in a series of Maimorim called Renat, which I'm just relearning with my friend, with my Chavrusa of 35 years. We're just relearning this at the moment, where the Rebbe says that the world is created through Shem Elokim, which I'm going to come to if we get time. I hope we do, and that is through what's called Midas Hadin. This is complicated. If you can't follow this, just let it pass for a moment. I'm saying that also for the tape. Midas Hadin means the strict justice as opposed to ordinary kindness. Why was the world created through Midas Hadin? Because the best present Hashem can give us as the prize of creation is the ability to triumph over the tests that Hashem gives us, which are for our benefit and for our growth. Now, to do that, the mon is deep code to understand it, that it's all right to get mother's milk for a little while, but when you and I become active, sophisticated, spiritual Jewish adults, you have to do better than just accept a general class, a general energy, than going to work, making a living, paying your bills, putting out the garbage, hoping that you're going to have this today or that, and not have that tomorrow, and worry about the future and all the things that people do, instead of living like a comatose retard. And I don't mean that critically. It's pathetic. But to be able to realize that each single person has a neshama which has a energy which is specific to him, not just an energy which is general like the highest klolis. It should be a highest proti. It should be specific, and one needs to spend an increasing amount of time in his life considering that, and understanding what's happening to him every day, and why it's happening to him every day is purposeful, not random happenstance, not a series of fortunate or unfortunate accidents. We believe in Hashgacha Pratis, we believe And everything is deliberate, as we're going to see. I'm going to try and get time to do some of this in a minute in more detail. But in general, the mon is there to explain to you and me that there's some time when you can just exist. You know, it's explained in Chassidus, it's a fascinating thing. Why are people scared to die? Why do you think people are scared to die? You know why they're scared to die? Because they don't want to stop experiencing. That's the word that's used. They don't want to stop experiencing. Now, who commits suicide? Dafka, the person who wants to stop experiencing. Mm-hmm. What he's experiencing is so painful and so difficult for him that he thinks he can't manage. Of course he can, otherwise it wouldn't be happening to him. And doesn't mean that you have to stand there and say to him, here's the philosophy of this. You've got to put your arm around him and help him and stop him committing suicide. But the fact is that the person that's committing suicide is somebody who is wanting to stop experiencing. The person who wants to live is a person who is loving the experiencing. Now, how much do you love the experiencing? Do you love the experiencing just to go to work and come home and, yeah, that's nice, and what feels good makes experiencing better? Or are you prepared to go to work and understand that your 60, 70, 120 years of experiencing needs to be understood and maximized and brought out to its full strength and degree? It's a completely different life. One's existence, one's living. And that's what Chabad Hasidus teaches. And the Rebbe takes this mon, which really sounds like a fairy story about food in the desert, and he takes it to pieces and analyzes the highest quality and the highest proti, and explains this, and it becomes a piece of something that one can work on and understand it in one's life. I'll try and get to more of that in a minute. So l'chaim. So, actually, let's do that now. BESHALAH Gani, let me just give you the background to it quickly. The Frierdiker Rebbe apparently knew when he was going to die. This isn't Torah Moshe Sinai. This is conclusions that some people have made. Whether you believe it or you don't believe it, there are certain tzaddikim that did know when they were going to die. He left at Savah. He left a will, a maimak, which we call, the opening words are BESHALAH Gani, so that's how the maimer is known. BESHALAH Gani means I came into my garden. And it's a maimer of 20 chapters, 20 oisias. And it was to be learned over certain Shabbosim. We haven't got time for that, but what happened was those 20 chapters are very deep. People had no idea how deep. And when the Rebbe took on the Nesius, Frierdiker Rebbe died in 1950, the Rebbe took on the Nesius 1951 on Yud Shvat, on that Shabbos. And on that Shabbos, he said his first mimer as a Rebbe, our Rebbe. And the first mimer he said was a mimer, BESHALAH Gani, starting with the words BESHALAH Gani, on chapter 1. And that was his first mimer as a Rebbe. And it goes for about 3/4 of an hour. And it's on tape. You can listen to it. And in that mimer, he addresses the first point in the first chapter, which I'm going to tell you quickly. If you don't follow it, don't worry. But the Rebbe begins by saying, this is a verse from Shir HaShirim. It says, I'm coming into my garden. BESHALAH Gani, the word Gani means my garden. And in other words, the world is a garden, not a jungle. Let's start with that. You have to understand that There is a potential for the world to be a garden of great beauty rather than a jungle. And on coming into my garden, it says that it was a place where the Ika Shechina B'Tachtoinim Hoesod, which means that the Ika, the main part of the Shechina, the God's presence, was present in that garden. And then came 7 sins, starting with Odomarishan and then Cain and Hevel, and the Shechina departed from Gashmias to the first heaven, then the second heaven, 7 heavens up. Then came 7 tzaddikim and patched it up to the point that the Shechina came back down one heaven after the other until Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai, where it was again on earth for 5 minutes because of the sin of the golden calf, when it went back up again. But for a minute it was back down. Why are we talking about the Shechina being here and coming down and going up? Because if you ask the question, why did God create the world? I mean, each of these things is a sheer on its own. It's very difficult to put it together meaningfully in a short summary, but let's try and go with it. The purpose, if you ask the question, what reason could God have to create the world? What did he need it for? I mean, you're talking about perfection, infinity. What does he need a world for with all the constrictions and problems and difficulties in it? So we learn the answer to that, Alpikasidis, is that he wanted a dira b'tachtoinim. He wanted a dwelling place in physicality where his presence, revealed presence, is impossible. The whole point of nature, the whole point of physicality is that God's hidden, right? That's the reality. And God is hidden to such an extent that this curtain of nature is impenetrable. You can see the result of what Hashem's doing, but you can't see Hashem. What's the moshel for that? You and I, you have to be very dumb not to know that you've got a neshama. Right? Why? Because you've got a life force. But can you see the neshama? Can you feel the neshama, measure the neshama, talk to the neshama? The neshama, you know nothing about the neshama whatsoever, other than the fact that it's definitely there. How do you know? Because when it's separated from the guf from lack of food, or the guf's just dead. It doesn't have a power to hear anymore. It doesn't have a power to speak anymore. All those powers are removed from the guf. Even if the guf has the most beautiful vocal cords in the world, if he dies, he can't sing a note, can't say a note. Why? Because the guf needs the neshama to live. Can you prove the neshama? Can you discuss anything with the neshama? Can you demonstrate the neshama? You can't. You can't point to the neshama. You can point to the results of the neshama. So same thing with the world. Hashem is locked away. You cannot access godliness in a revealed way. You can access obvious evidence of Hashem because the world is purposeful and whatever the millions of proofs are. You only have to look at DNA to just understand how incredible the results of Hashem. But you can't see or feel or touch or talk to Hashem himself, right? Now, when it says that the Ika Shechina B'Tachtoinim Hoi, so that the main part of the Shechina was below, first of all, what does that mean? How can you have the main part of God? Shechina is God's presence. So what does it mean, the main part of God? So the first Maimah, Rebbe said in 1951, took that question of what does it mean, the Ika Shechina, and spent a whole Maimah of 20 odd oisius explaining that. That was his first mimer. The answer to that, by the way, just very quickly, just summarizing it, is that the Shekhinah is the evidence of godliness, and to the extent that the evidence was purposeful and revealed purposeful, that was the Ika Shekhinah. And that, we don't have that today. We don't have that until Mashiach comes. Okay, so that was the first voice. Then the next year, to everybody's surprise, the Rebbe came out and did again on Yud Shvat. 1 year later, he did the second chapter. And the next year, the third and the fourth and the fifth. For 20 years, he did one chapter each time and made each chapter into a full mimer, an hour long, right? And difficult, very difficult Hasidus. When he finished, after 20 years, he started again.
Yeah.
And went another 20. So this year is the year 15. So the Chabad studies Hofhei 25, which is 1965, because that was 15 years after 1951, and we study 85, the year 1985. Mem. In the Maimah, the first Maimah is incredibly difficult. Of all the Maimorim, I think this year's probably one of the hardest. It's very, very difficult. I'm not going to attempt to deal with it tonight, except to just take a couple of points out of it. But I do need to go back to the mothership Maimah, to the one from the Friedrich Rebbe, where I explained that it starts off by saying that the Ika Shekhinah was below on earth. When it went away, it then became our job as Am Yisrael, from the time of Matan Torah until the time of Mashiach, to reveal godliness in nature. In other words, to bring the Ika Shekhinah back down to. Now, does Hashem need, in inverted commas, us to do that? Well, he chooses for us to do that. Could he do it himself? He could. He had it himself before Adam made the Ket. But that's not the game. The game isn't for Hashem to do it. The game is for you and me to do it. And how do we do it? We do it by bringing light out of darkness, converting darkness into light. How do we do that? I'm making this too short, but otherwise you just won't know where this is going at all. It's really not fair to the moment. But there's a word called, so how do we do it? It says that we do it by making the Beis Mikdash. It says, Osol in Mikdash, make me a Mikdash, v'shalchanti b'soicham, and I will dwell amongst you. And it doesn't say amongst, in it says amongst you. What does it mean amongst you? Kol echad ve'echad in Israel, every single Jew. You make me a sanctuary and I'll live in you, says Hashem. How do you make the sanctuary? We have to convert darkness into light. How do we do that? By a skafia and a skapka. We've learned this in other places. By refusing to do wrong and converting bad into good. That's the task. And how do we do that? I'm just going it up too fast, but let me just say it to you so that we have it on board together. We do it by making the kroshim, the poles, the boards of the Mishkan. When you have to make the Mishkan for Hashem to dwell in, that Mishkan in your heart, you have to make it out of kroshim, out of boards, out of... What's kroshim? It's the word sheker backwards. Yeah, I'm talking to an Israeli. So another one. Sheker means lies. The world is a lie. What's the lie? We don't see Hashem. We have to take that lie and make from that lie boards, holds a structure for the Mishkan that is, which Hashem will live in your and my heart every day and every moment of our lives. That whole process is what we've just been talking about, is a development from the Mon. In other words, we have Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's not a historical story. This is your and my life. You've got to understand, this is a code. This is a code for your and my life every day of our life. You have every day of our life. You're going to have a Mitzrayim. You're going to have a place where you're fetched, where you're confined, where movement is difficult, where you're restrained. And every day of your life, you're going to have a Yetzias Mitzrayim. You're going to have a way of being able to break through those boundaries if you take the opportunity. And every day that we do that, we have the opportunity to relive this whole dynamic of the Bossi Lagani, that we have to take the lies of our life that we see and turn them into truths. And you do that by what in the Maimar is described as a shtush for kedusha rather than a shtush for bad. All right, l'chaim. Ultimately, what is the Bossi Lagani Maimar come to? It comes to the fact that sometimes in a war, and we are all at war, because we've all got Yetzer Haras, we've all got temptations, we've all got things that are going to be preventing us from greatness. Understand this, for a Jew, greatness is this achievement we're talking about. It's not being on Fortune magazine or being the richest guy in Rookwood, it's about managing your life to greatness. And what does that mean? It means the things that Hashem sets before you and me, they'll be different. My tests are different to your tests, and it's stupid to compare my test to your test or your test to my test, but overcoming those challenges is our pathway to our personal greatness. It has nothing to do with anybody else's pathway. So this war that we fight every day, and one of the big enemies in that war is laziness, indolence, boredom, being lax and not believing it's worth the struggle. But in this war, the Rebbe gives a moshel of a king who has a son who's very sick. And let's pretend, we all understand that this isn't so, but let's pretend that the only way to cure this king's son is for the king to grind up the crown jewels and soak them in liquid and have him drink it. Let's pretend that would work. Let's pretend it would work. Is there any king who wouldn't use the crown jewels to do it? So the Rebbe explains that for a Jew, the crown jewels are the Torah, this part of Torah that we're learning, the secret side of Torah, the Chassidus, and bless you, and that preciousness is taken by the king in the moshel, and who benefits? The foot soldier, because that becomes the weaponry for the foot soldier. The money that you get by raiding the storehouse is to put shoes and whatever it is on the soldiers. So the soldier is the one that's benefiting. Explains the Rebbe that the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbes before him took all these secrets of Torah, which for thousands of years Yidden wouldn't share with anybody. Talmidei Chachamim knew all this. Very few of them, but they knew it, and they believed that an ordinary Jew should sit and learn halakha, should sit and learn Talmud. These secrets are not for them. When times became so dangerous, in terms of Kedusha, it was necessary to take out the crown jewels and make them available to the foot soldiers. That's you and me. So that's what we're learning. We're learning this stuff. And that once that's available, that needs to go to each and every foot soldier so that he's armed and able to manage. And then it has to be with understanding that it's for his own personal needs, his own personal challenges. Again, we're back to the same dynamic, that each person is going to have a different set of challenges and a different set of resources to deal with those challenges. So you're a fool if you don't go and examine what your resources are. And you're a fool, equal fool, if you lament that you don't have certain resources. If you don't have certain resources, not your fault. That guy that we were talking about, he can't play tennis. He had 1,000 lessons from you, right? At least. He still couldn't hit the ball. He used to arrive at my tennis court with 5 tennis rackets and 2 headbands and all the equipment that you can possibly, and he'd go up onto the court and he couldn't hit the ball over the net. Nebok, right? Now, should he go home and beat himself up about that? If he does, he's an idiot. It's not his fault. He can't do it.
A lot of people would though.
But that's because they don't understand what we're learning here.
Yeah.
So you and I have the exact cocktail of abilities and failings that we are supposed to have to meet the challenges that we have to deal with every day of our life up till now, and every day of our life from now until 120. And they will change, by the way. If you grow, the challenges will change. Do they get any easier? Let's give a bracha to everybody that they should. But the fact of the matter is that it's different for every person. Okay, I've run out of time, but I need to do this because the rivers do it. I'm going to be another 3 minutes. I want to talk very quickly about Kriyas Yamsuf, splitting of the sea. Let me explain an unbelievably deep thing. This really should be a whole shiur on these 5 words. The account of creation begins like this: Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. In the beginning, it's usually translated, God created the heavens and the earth. But the Hebrew is very different to those words, because you've got to understand the implications of the Hebrew. Bereshis bara, in the beginning created, Elokim. Now Elokim is not Shem Havaya, Yud Hey Vav Hey. Elokim is midas hadin, strict nature. You can't have Rachmanis and say, well, the sun should sleep in another quarter of an hour today because it's a bit tired from yesterday. Sun's got to rise at the same point of time. It's got to be exact. There's no mucking around here. So nature is created through Shem Elokim, and Shem Elokim is a curtain against the Giloi, against the revelation of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, Shem Havaya. Then it uses an incredible word, Bereshis bara Elokim es. Es, right? Now I have no Hebrew grammar, but even I know that es is used when there's an object. Is that a fair description? Is that right? When there is an object, how can there be an object? Eino ed milvadoi. There's nothing else but godliness. So how can you say Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz? How can you say that? So, and we can't do that in the shiur tonight. I'm just wanting you to hear what the energies that we're talking about are. Then, so one explanation which comes from the Baal Shem Tov, which the Rebbe mentions in this year's Maimah on Bossi Lagani, he says that we learn, and you guys have all had enough of Kremnizer to know that we learn as a matter of Tanya, that Hashem didn't create the world 5,758 years ago, or whatever it is. He creates it every microsecond, renews it all the time. How? Through speech. What does that mean? Through an external level of his capacities. Through speech. What's the word S? It's the first and last letter of the alphabet. In other words, through the 22 oisius of the Aleph base, that's how Hashem creates the world. So that word S isn't there just by some accident. It's really deep Torah. You've got to understand this is, we're talking, and when the Bible critics or the idiots do it in English or in Latin or in, they miss this. How can they not miss it? You know, it's so. But the world is so. This level of Elohim, that is nature, and all of creation relates to Hashem through Shem Elohim. There is an exception to that. The exception to that is Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael have a relationship with Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. What does that mean? Does that mean that we're special darlings and that we are privileged and we should go at the front of the bus and everybody else should go at the back of the bus and we are more brainy and we're more... It's none of those things. It means that we have a separate job to do. Our job is a spiritual job. Everything else in nature is a physical job. The physical job is very precious. Our job is precious. But our job is to introduce spirituality into physicality. And that job of introducing spirituality into physicality comes through our connection to Shem Havaya, Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. So what happened at Kriyas Yam Suf? At Kriyas Yam Suf, Shem Elohim was trumped by Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and everything that was physical divided. So the hiddenness became revealed. What became revealed? All the things that we've been learning about. The Shekhinah having a potential to be B'taktoinim, Am Yisrael to have its job of bringing, making a Dira B'taktoinim. All of those things became evident to Am Yisrael and became the basis for Matan Torah. So we ran out of time 5 minutes ago, but I just, I'm turning it off because I think after a minute I can't send it on, but I've got another minute. This is a huge Sedra, this Sedra of BESHALAH. It's got all these apparent simple story miracles in it. You have to know that this is the DNA of your and my life. And you know, honestly, without exaggerating, you could probably spend a year of your life with a Talmud Chacham learning Parshas BESHALAH, because that's a Jew's life. A Jew's life, first of all, we're a miracle. I mean, give me a break. We're out of 8.5 billion nefashos on this planet, we're just a joke of a number. And the newspapers talk about nothing else but Am Yisrael and Israel. Nothing else. Yeah. Century after century. That's all the world talks about.
It was the opening motion in Parliament today.
Yeah. Well, there you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
it defies logic.
So we are a miraculous nation, and we have miraculous lives. Now, one of the great wastes and travesties of that life is not to investigate it, not to try and understand it, not to try and work with it. And you're not working with it for your own satisfaction and glory, you're working for it to serve Hashem. Because by serving Hashem, actually, that is the way that a person flowers and grows the most. Okay, so anyway.
Good.
Yeah, brilliant.